Hello, my name is 환산스님, and this is Sun Meditation in English. So once again, whatever we're doing, whatever's on our mind, let's put all of that stuff down right now and let's enter into guided meditation together. And after assuming correct meditation posture, let's now enter into preparation breathing. Shall we do that together? So inhale through the nose, hold, then exhale through the mouth. Once again, inhale through the nose, hold, and then exhale through the mouth. Now let's engage abdominal breathing, which we'll do only through the nose. So inhale, hold, and then exhale. When we inhale, we push our lower bellies out as if our bellies are filling with air. We hold for 2 to 3 seconds. And then when we exhale through our nose, we draw in our belly button toward our spine as if we're squeezing the air out of our lower belly. And now let's engage the 이목고 화두 together. So inhale, hold, and then together, 이목고. Once again, inhale, hold, and then exhale, 이목고. What is this? Through this question, we will create and maintain the state of unknowable doubt, the state of being blocked, of trying to know the unknowable, to perceive the unperceivable. So we will continue to maintain this posture, this abdominal breathing, and this state of unknowable doubt through the repeated raising of the question, 이목고. So please conduct meditation for the remainder of the program. The question for today's consideration is, how can I perform sun meditation if I feel committed to, or if I feel that I belong to another religious tradition and hold religious beliefs that seem to be very different from the kinds of beliefs that seem to be taught in Buddhism? This is a very important question, and one that I encounter often, especially in my meetings with international practitioners. I am often asked the question, can I meditate when I believe in God? Or how can I meditate in the Buddhist form of meditation when Buddhism doesn't seem to have a teaching about God or hold a belief about God? So it's very understandable that people with other religious beliefs might feel a certain sense of discomfort or unfamiliarity when they encounter the teachings of Buddhism, which seem so different from the ones that they're accustomed to. So I think this is a very, very important question for us modern people who live in what has been called the age of religious plurality. So now, in order to address this question, I think what we first need is a general basic understanding of what meditation is. Not just sun meditation, but broadly speaking, what is meditation? So I would like to propose that basically what meditation is the use of long-term, sustained mental focus on an object for the purpose of creating a physical, a psychological, an energetic, or a spiritual change. Now, this object of our meditation can be almost anything. We can use as the object of our attention our own breathing, or some other physical action within our bodies, or some physical process that's occurring within our bodies. We can also use as the object of meditation words, a phrase. For example, in sun meditation, we use the words, the phrase, 이목고, to create the desired meditative state. So text can be used as an object of meditation, and in some cases, even a single word can be used as the focal point of meditation. Beyond words, we can even use an image. We can use an external image, like a statue or a painting of a beloved religious figure, or a religious symbol, such as in Buddhism, the mandala. We can even meditate upon a sound. Beyond that, we can even meditate upon a fragrance. Beyond that, we can even meditate upon a general global state of mind or state of body or both. So there is great variety in the kinds of things we can use as the object of meditation, and therefore there is a tremendous variety in the types of meditation that are practiced throughout history and throughout all of the various world religious traditions. Just as a note, even prayer within this context would be considered a state of meditation. Now, in some traditions, in prayer we can use a repeated phrase, or we can set up a state of mind of devotion or of aspiration or wishing for something, or even simply opening one's mind and heart to the unknowable, to that which is beyond comprehension. Now, it's usual to think that meditation requires a specific physical posture or a specific way of breathing. And certainly in the sun meditation that we practice, we use this seated position, both in a chair or on a meditation mat, and we use a very specific breathing pattern in our abdominal breathing. But these are not necessarily required to perform meditation, and even in our sun meditation, we are called upon to focus on imoko and create the state of doubt even in our everyday lives when our posture is constantly changing and even our breathing pattern is constantly changing. Going beyond that, often people think that you have to stay still to meditate, and meditation is often associated with a state of both mental and physical stillness or calmness or peace or quiet. But there are also forms of meditation that use movement, so-called moving meditation, such as Tai Chi and yoga, which are very famous for using very fluid, very elegant and subtle movements to create heightened levels of consciousness and sensitivity. In some traditions, very strong movement can be used to create ecstatic states of meditation. And the movement can look, to the eyes of the uninitiated, those movements can look very frantic, very powerful. And certain forms of dance meditation also exist. So the varieties of meditative techniques are really, really very broad-ranging, far beyond those which we traditionally think of as meditation and which has been traditionally presented as meditation. Now, one of the most important and interesting things of meditation in the modern world is that meditation is so often used now for non-religious purposes by people who don't profess to belong to any religion whatsoever. So, for example, it's widely known now that meditation has a variety of psychological health benefits, and many people perform meditation just for those benefits. They perform meditation to reduce stress, to reduce anxiety, to learn how to manage anger, to learn how to regulate their own emotions. But going a step beyond that, meditation is used on the professional level as well in a number of different psychotherapeutic modalities to treat clinically diagnosable mental illness or behavioral disorders. I've mentioned this on this program before, but meditation can be used in the treatment of addiction and phobia. Beyond that, meditation is now even being used in hospital settings as part of medical treatment plans. Meditation is widely used for pain reduction for people who have issues with their nervous system. It's also used to reduce blood pressure. Tai Chi is considered one of the greatest methods for restoring sense of balance and maintaining sense of balance in elderly patients who have begun to lose those functions and mechanisms. So meditation has even found itself into the modern medical world. Beyond that, meditation is now being experimentally introduced into the educational system for young students to learn to increase their academic performance, to increase their ability to regulate their own emotions, and to socially relate with others in an appropriate way. Some years back, there was a lot of talk about so-called EQ, emotional quotient, the ability to delay one's gratification, the ability to pursue a long-term goal rather than short-term pleasures like snacking or watching TV and so forth. And it was claimed for a while that this form of this ability to delay gratification is a greater predictor of future success than even the SAT and other standardized tests. That the ability to sacrifice in the name of a future as yet unseen goal is a far more valuable quality than sheer test-taking ability. So meditation is now being, and meditation is well known for creating willpower and control of our emotions. So meditation is now being considered for its educational benefits. Beyond even that, meditation has been used and is being used in prison systems to help prisoners deal with their extraordinary levels of stress and the very difficult thoughts and emotions that they must suffer through, and just the general difficulty of their lifestyles, and especially in order to regulate the behaviors that got them into trouble in the first place. So even prisons now are introducing meditation. And finally, for some of our viewers, this may be a very interesting fact, and it's also become well known. Meditation is now very commonly used at the highest level of competitive sports. Coach Phil Jackson of the NBA during the 90s was very famous for teaching Japanese Zen meditation to Michael Jordan and the rest of the Chicago Bulls. And all of them attributed their amazing success during that 10-year period. They won a great number of NBA championships. Part of that success was attributed to the benefits of meditation, the gains in social harmony, being able to react to one another, to control one's emotions. So even at the level of professional sport, meditation is now being acknowledged for its benefits. More recently, the golfer Tiger Woods has publicly stated that he uses meditation, Buddhist meditation, to increase his concentration during competitive play and to increase the precision of his shot making. And then more broadly speaking, since for at least the last 20 or even 30 years, almost all, if not all, Olympic athletes use visualization meditation techniques to enhance their performance. One of the most common things for them to do is to visualize a successful performance in their minds when they're not training, because even they can't train 24 hours a day. Another interesting fact about this is that if they imagine themselves working out, if they imagine themselves in very graphic, vivid detail, undertaking the various movements, the micro movements involved in exercising, they will actually increase the growth of their muscle tissue. This has been experimentally proven. So sheer visualization of exercise can increase muscle, has physiological effects. And this scientific fact is being used toward the competitive end in professional sports and at the highest levels of amateur sports. So the truth is, meditation is already out there in the modern world. And ironically enough, meditation may be being deployed in the Western world more widely and more frequently than in the Asian nations, which are considered to have invented them. So this is very interesting. And another interesting fact, as I noted, is that many people practice meditation even for spiritual gain when they don't belong to any religion whatsoever. So there's just this modern trend where people want to be spiritual but not religious, and they find within meditative practice a path for realizing that very highly defined spiritual goal. So this is where we are with meditation in the modern world. But once again, the question is, what do we do if we already have very deeply held religious beliefs that are different from those of Buddhism, and yet we want to practice meditation? We feel somehow attracted to meditation, especially sun meditation, and want to incorporate that into our religious lives in a harmonious way. Now, in this context, I would actually like to tell an exemplary story of someone that I know, and I'm going to call this person Karen. Now, Karen is a lovely young woman, and when she was young, she privileged me with her life story, but when she was young, she kind of lived like a rock star. That's what it sounds like. She had a very wild, fast, very active social life, had a lot of fun, but at some point, this lifestyle began to take over, and she became more and more self-destructive and more out of control, and it began initially to threaten her health, both psychologically and physically, her well-being, and finally it even threatened her life. It had gotten completely out of control, and things came to a head one day when she got caught in a terrible traffic accident. Fortunately, no one else was hurt. She was driving, and her car flipped over, any number of times, like you see in Hollywood movies. And when, I can't remember the details of the story, but when she climbed out of the car in a daze, people had already kind of stopped, and they were shocked to see that anybody could have survived such a tremendous accident, let alone walk out unharmed. So she took this as a kind of message that was given to her. It was a signal for her to change, and she went about the process of changing. And she says that on a certain day, I believe when she was watching a very beautiful sunset, and she was making sort of her climb out of her former lifestyle, she heard the voice of God. She heard it very distinctly, a voice from outside her mind and body that she could hear within her own mind. She knew that it wasn't that she wasn't going crazy, that this was not mental illness. She was very clear. She knew that she just knew with great inner certainty that this was the voice of God. And this began her life as a Christian devotee. She began going to church. She took the teachings very seriously. She began prayer. So there are many stories like this in the Christian tradition where somehow someone who's sort of heading in the wrong way is suddenly saved by some kind of benevolent voice or presence or power beyond them. But what's very interesting about Karen was that she was also very deeply drawn to meditation, and she began coming to the gatherings that I used to lead a couple of years ago. And she was very drawn to certain aspects of Buddhist teaching and practice. And she would sort of say to me, half seriously, half jokingly, I can't tell whether I'm a Christian Buddhist or a Buddhist Christian. And she said that when she went to church, in spite of this deep connection that she felt with this grand infinite divinity, nonetheless she felt that she wasn't getting something. And I think that when she came to our gatherings too, she was too polite to say it, but I think that by simply teaching within a strict Buddhist context, that again, she wasn't getting all of what she wanted, and she didn't know how to harmonize the differences between the doctrines of Christianity and Buddhism. Now this happens quite often in the modern world, and I believe that this is an issue that really needs to be dealt with. Now, I think one of the problems that we have when we feel drawn to more than one religious tradition, when we feel committed to more than one religious tradition, is that in the modern age, religion is so often equated with belief, what beliefs we hold. In the United States, it's very common to ask about another person's religion by asking the question, what do you believe in? As if belief is the core of the religious life, as if belief is the most important thing. So again, the question comes, how can I meditate if I believe in God or some other religious tradition? So this is the question that's set before us. And what Buddhism has to offer in terms of resolving this conflict over belief, I believe they have a very compelling teaching to offer that can be used across religious traditions. Buddhists argue that identification with belief can be self-defeating and cause social conflict. It's okay to hold a belief if you're not identified with it, if you do not draw your identity from it. You can believe, for example, as many people used to do, that red meat is good for your health. Up until the 50s, perhaps the 60s, people believed that red meat was good for your health. And then later data began to come out that red meat is not good for our health, so people switched and realized that they began to believe red meat is not good for our health. And there was no problem with switching beliefs because we were not identified with it, most of us. We didn't draw our identity from our diet or from our personal food preference. We can believe that the earth is round, but if one day scientists tell us, well, that it's not round or it's holographic image or something, then I think many of us will make the adjustment. They say, oh, I thought it used to be round, but I guess not. Because once again, we're not emotionally attached to the belief. We're not drawing our identity from it. But when we draw our identity from our beliefs, when we feel that this belief defines who and what I am and the meaning of my life, it's very reassuring on the one hand, but the problem that arises is that if someone else holds a belief that's contrary to mine, I will begin to feel insecure. When they argue against my beliefs, it feels like they're arguing against me and the way I live and my whole way of existing in the world. So I will feel insecure. I may feel threatened, I may even feel offended. And so extreme attachment and identification with belief in this way can lead to disharmony and strife among people. This is the Buddhist argument. And we can see that readily in our everyday lives. I think one of the great causes of arguments between people is differences in political belief. Politically conservative people and politically liberal people the conversation between them can get very heated when they feel very committed to their political views and feel that they are defined by their political views, and anybody who criticizes their views is in effect criticizing them. And what's interesting is that people holding different political views will often accuse each other of the same thing, that the other person is inhumane or insensitive or doesn't care about people or or isn't realistic about the world. They make the same accusations against each other even though they may hold different views. Almost any belief, when identified with, when attached to, can become the occasion for an argument, for social conflict, even differences in musical taste. Especially among young people, people can become very attached to musicians whose music and songs seem to express what's in their heart. And so if you criticize the musician that they love, they will react as if you are criticizing them personally. So anything can become a source of conflict when it becomes attached to. Food can become a source of conflict. Even though I said there's no issue with red meat, some people are very committed to their lifestyle of eating meat, and they'll feel threatened or offended if they're told that the way they eat is somehow unhealthy or bad for the earth. Vegetarians likewise don't like to be portrayed as being odd or being somehow strange, socially strange. They don't like it either. When you criticize what they eat, they feel that they're being criticized for what they are. So this is the Buddhist critique of identification with belief. And this belief is very strongly held, or this teaching is very strongly held, ironically enough, within Sun Buddhism, where the identification with one's beliefs is not only considered a source of social conflict, but actually a state of delusion, a state of being attached to a false conception of self. We are mistaking our ideas, our beliefs, our memories, our emotions and thoughts for what we are. No matter how accurate our beliefs may be, still it is misconceived to become attached to them. Within Sun Buddhism, the teaching is to direct our attention to the source of our consciousness, the source of our existence, not to the thoughts and ideas that we have in our heads. And Sun Buddhism is very famous for what some people consider a form of iconoclasm. Some Buddhists have argued that even attachment to Buddhist beliefs can be harmful to our practice. And this idea or attitude gives rise to the famous Sun Buddhist dictum, throw away all teachings, throw away all doctrines, and enter into Sun. Even more radically, they'll say even our conceptions of the Buddha himself, our devotion to the Buddha himself, can be an obstruction to our practice, because in reality, we're really attached to an image of the Buddha in our minds and have not yet made contact with the reality of the Buddha. And so this critique gives rise to the startling phrase, if you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha, a very famous Sun Buddhist teaching. Within Sun Buddhism, truth, reality, the meaning of life, is considered inexpressible in words and incomprehensible to unenlightened consciousness. Because of this, the teaching is for us to pursue enlightenment. Now, the idea that absolute truth or the highest truth is inexpressible in words and incomprehensible to common human consciousness is actually not a controversial teaching. It is actually a teaching that is shared by all of the world's great religious traditions. For example, in Judaism, the true name of God is considered unpronounceable. And this is a way of signifying that the reality of God, the truth of God, cannot be understood or expressed in limited human terms. In all of the theistic traditions, which would include Christianity, in addition to Judaism, would include Christianity and Hinduism and Islam, some thinkers argue that to believe that your idea of God is actually a form of idolatry. You're actually worshiping the wrong thing. You don't mean to, but you're worshiping your idea of God, or your idea of Allah, or your idea of Brahman. You're not really making a connection with that divine, transcendent truth or reality, or however you want to express it. And some will even argue that to say things about God as if God were somehow like human beings, to say that God wants this, that God knows this, that this is God's purpose, is to attribute human qualities, finite qualities, to something or someone that is inherently infinite and unknowable. So even within the theistic tradition, there is a caution against identifying too strongly with its own doctrines or beliefs. Generally speaking, every single religious tradition understands that, especially for beginning spiritual practitioners like us, we need doctrines, we need teachings, we need beliefs, because these doctrines and teachings and beliefs provide us with a framework, an initial framework for understanding and interpreting our lives and the world around us. But they caution us against becoming overly attached or overly identified with these beliefs, because they can create the social conflict that I've mentioned and states of inner delusion or erroneous states of mind or practice. And so they are considered dangerous. This is a caution that occurs in all religious traditions. So then what are we to do if belief, if pure attachment to belief and definition by belief is unreliable and has pitfalls? Why don't we take a break, and when we come back, we'll consider what other alternative approaches to religious practice there may be. So if we are to understand religion in terms other than those of belief, if we're going to think of religion as something beyond simple belief, how are we to go about this? And I would like to suggest today that maybe we can define our religious lives not in terms of what we believe, but in terms of how we behave, in terms of how we treat ourselves, how we treat our fellow human beings, how we treat our fellow living beings, and how we behave toward the world around us, the world that we all share and are responsible for. So under these terms, the question doesn't become believing in, say, the Buddha. The question becomes doing as the Buddha did. The question is not believing in Jesus Christ, but to live as Christ lived. And again, the question is not to believe in Allah or Islam, but to comport oneself, to conduct oneself as Muhammad did. When we begin to understand these things, then the point of the question returns to our own behavior, not what someone else is believing or doing with their own lives. And when we ask each other about each other's religious life or religious practice, instead of asking, when we ask about another person's religion, instead of asking, what do you believe in, maybe it would be better to ask, what kind of spiritual practice, if any, do you engage in? When you ask what someone believes in, there's a slight note of confrontation. Do you believe in the same things I do? But when you ask a question about someone's spiritual practice, it's very open. What kind of spiritual practice do you engage in? I pray to Jesus Christ. Oh, really? I meditate on Imoko. There's no conflict. And in fact, there's an inclusion on a common path of moral and spiritual self-development that we can all agree on. So it becomes, even as a point of social decorum, it might be very helpful for us to ask in terms of what we do and how we apply our religious convictions rather than what ideas we hold in our minds about our specific religion. When you look at the various traditions, religious traditions of the world in terms of belief, if you define religious tradition in terms of belief, what you will see is great difference from one tradition to the other. You will see one set of religions saying this about the world and another religious tradition saying that about the world, and no one seems to agree. You will see disagreement and difference. And you will not only see that across religious traditions, you will see that within each religious tradition. Because even each religious tradition, whether it be Buddhism or Christianity or Islam or Hinduism, each religious tradition also has differences of opinion among their own teachings. And so, for example, within Buddhism, there is a line or a boundary drawn between South Asian, so-called Theravadan Buddhism, and Mahayana Buddhism that's associated with Northern Asia, and now a distinction made between those two and so-called Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. And some Buddhist scholars have gone so far as to say that they are not three different variations of Buddhism, they are actually three different religions, three different Buddhist religions. In Christianity, you see the same or a similar boundary between Catholicism and so-called Protestantism. In any religious tradition, when you look inside, you will see division if you look through the lens of belief. So asking about belief, defining according to belief, tends to create divisions and categories and classifications that can lead to certain types of social tension. But if you look at the human qualities, the kinds of behavior that each religious tradition expects of us, then all of a sudden you get a completely different picture. Now you're struck by how similar the religious traditions are. Their idea of the good life, the holy life, the true life, the truly human, authentic life are all remarkably similar. Every religious tradition emphasizes the sacredness of human life, the importance of unconditional love and compassion, the need for transcendent wisdom, the need for justice and humility and forgiveness and gratitude. These are values and practices that go across all religious traditions. And if you look at the lives of the great spiritual and religious teachers and leaders who not only founded the various religious traditions, but also helped to maintain and develop them, it's amazing how similar they are across every religious tradition. All of the great saints, the holy saints, the enlightened sages, the mystics, the teachers, all of these great spiritual leaders are commonly depicted as having halos around them, around their heads and around their bodies, which I believe signifies a common radiance that they found somehow within themselves or beyond themselves. And they are universally depicted as being gentle and loving and wise and forgiving and humble. So what we see when we think in terms of religion, in terms of what it tells us how to live and what to do and what kind of person to be, they're so similar that there doesn't seem to be any need for argument or even conversation, and that we can just simply live together. Sun Master Songdam in this regard likes to tell a joke that if the Buddha and Jesus Christ and Mohammed and Lao Tzu and Confucius got trapped in an elevator together, they wouldn't fight. So this is kind of a joke that he likes to make, and I think that we can all agree that would most likely be the case. Many of us think that religions are very distinct from one another, that there are sharply held boundaries between one religious tradition and another. But the truth is that throughout all of human histories, the various religious traditions have always been interacting, have always been exchanging ideas and teachings and practices and ceremonies and images, everything. It has always been going back and forth. Buddhism arose from the so-called Hindu, Indian religious culture. Christianity is considered to have two religious roots, the Judaic tradition and the Greek philosophical tradition. Islam has been influenced both by Judaism and Christianity and even Buddhism. Buddhism had an influence in its so-called mystical Sufi tradition. So the religions have always been cross-pollinating, always been exchanging, and always mixing together to form new religions, new ideas, new ways of being human in the world. Now, in our current modern age, this age of what I called religious plurality, all of the religions and many new ones and all sorts of combinations thereof are presented to us. If you live in a modern, developed, economically developed nation or society, you have a great range of choices in religions. It's almost like a giant supermarket of religions. And this situation has been both praised and criticized. And I believe that there are genuine pros and cons. The con, I think the limitation here, I think, is that there's a risk of commodifying religion, that it's one more product that we can buy, one more thing that we can add to our list of possessions, and there's a danger of trivializing religion rather than preserving its original status as a path and a life that we give ourselves to and devote ourselves to and commit ourselves to. So I think that's a possible danger or limitation, and I agree with that criticism. But I think the pros, the opportunities and advantages of this age of religious plurality far outweigh the disadvantages. Here now we have an opportunity for the religious traditions to teach and learn and talk with one another and communicate with one another and work together. Because of all these increases in our technology for communication and transportation, it's so easy now to make contact with each other, to meet with each other, to form relationships with each other. And I think this is very important for us because the modern age presents modern civilization, our society, our world, with challenges that the great spiritual teachers and founders of the past never openly talked about. We are faced with challenges and difficulties and problems that the Buddha, Jesus Christ, Mohammed, Lao Tzu, Confucius, and any of the other teachers never specifically talked about. For example, the Buddha never told us exactly what we're supposed to do or how we're supposed to deal with a nation that supports terrorism or some other form of mass systematic violence against civilian populations. Jesus Christ never provided a teaching on what to do, if anything, with cloning technology, with the ability to clone human parts, human genes, and eventually, probably, human beings. There's nothing in the Bible about that. Mohammed never told us whether or how we should use nuclear power. Lao Tzu never taught us how to reverse climate change. Confucius never taught us how to protect the rights of women and other marginalized or disenfranchised or disempowered or oppressed populations in a global economy. These are problems and challenges we need to figure out for ourselves. So does that make traditional religious teaching obsolete? I don't believe so. I think this age confronts us with the challenge not only of following the teachings of our teachers on the level of belief, but attaining to the kinds of wisdom and unconditional love and grace and revelation and enlightenment that they themselves attained and left behind the teachings for us to follow, that we need to become and do as they were and did. The modern civilization, the individuals, organizations, states, gatherings, both global and local, that make up our global civilization are now more economically interdependent, culturally diverse, and technologically more powerful than ever before in history. So even on the brute financial level, even on the level of individual profit, It's no longer enough simply to be innovative, productive, efficient, and profitable. For my own individual well-being, and for our mutual prosperity, and even for our mutual survival, we may need to become as our religious teachers once were. We may need to become, I believe we do need to become more wise, more loving and compassionate, more patient and calm, more forgiving and more open and accepting than we have ever been before as a species. So, in the case of today's question, I do believe that sun meditation can be performed by members of any religious tradition. And in fact, in my home temple of Yonghwasa in Incheon, there have been many times when Catholic priests and nuns came to our meditation halls to practice meditation with us. And what they wanted to learn were methods for enhancing their mental focus so that they could devote themselves to their lives under God and Jesus Christ in a more authentic and powerful way. They were trying to be better Christians by learning Buddhist meditation. And I think this is something that we can all do together. In terms of this program, I believe that the benefits of meditation are so obvious that it would be foolish not to meditate. It's inexpensive, it doesn't require that much time, space, or resources, and it can do so much to change us in a positive direction. There was a time when exercise, when working out was considered odd. Maybe 50, 60 years ago, there were no health clubs and people didn't go jogging. Exercise, working out, was considered to be something that only professional athletes and dancers do. And for normal, quote, normal people to do that was considered a little strange. But then the health movement came in, health clubs were founded, and now, if anything, it's considered almost requisite to exercise and take care of our bodies. And there's a massive industry that creates accessories and equipment and various kinds of gyms and health centers that are organized around this cultural shift that has occurred. I believe the same thing can occur in terms of meditation. That just as you don't need to be a professional athlete or dancer anymore to engage in a healthy life that incorporates exercise, in the same way, we don't need to be committed to a specific religious tradition to meditate. These days, yoga and Tai Chi have been divorced from their original traditional settings. You don't have to be Hindu anymore to perform yoga. You don't have to be a card-carrying Taoist to perform Tai Chi or Qigong. So broadly speaking, I think in the same way, meditation can be simply seen as a logical, common sense way of taking care of our minds, our hearts, our thoughts, and our emotions. And in closing for this program, I would like to see a day when it becomes a natural part of our culture, just as exercise and yoga and Tai Chi now are, and that it could even become part of our educational system, something that is taught within the health education programs of both public and private schools. So this is the message that I would like to share in today's program. In closing, I would like to share what Sun Master Songdam once said. He said, you don't have to believe in the Buddha, and you don't have to prescribe to a certain set of beliefs. And even if you do believe in God or some other religious tradition, if you practice this imoko meditation sincerely and with great commitment, then you are my disciple and my co-practitioner. So this is the message for today's program. I believe we're out of time. So once again, in closing, I would like to thank our studio audience members and the viewers at home who have practiced with us today. And once again, in closing, may we all attain the Buddha. And now for our closing session of meditation. you.